The training yard of Outpost K-17 was silent in the way only disciplined fear could create. Rows of Cadets 12 species for gravity tolerances, and 100 variations of hardened military pride stood rigid behind the transparent blast barrier. Their instructors had ordered them to observe, not intervene. That order alone told them this was either a test or a tragedy in progress. In the center of the yard stood a single human. She was small by galactic standards. No armor, no weapon, just a standard issue field jacket, boots dusty from the red soil of the moon, and eyes fixed on the far gate. Behind that gate, something roared. The cub burst into view like a living missile, 6 feet long at the shoulder, claws curved like crescent blades, hide plated with overlapping chitin scales that shimmered between slate and bronze. Its species designation Korthal, Apex juvenile, was stamped in every cadet's memory alongside one word: uncontainable. Even as a cub, the Korthal were why entire colonies had been abandoned. Why veteran Marines carried scars they didn't talk about. Why the cadets' hearts hammered now as the cub lowered its head and charged straight at the human woman. Gasps rippled through the observation deck. "Shields," someone shouted. They said, "No interference. It's going to tear her apart." The human didn't run. She didn't raise her arms defensively. She crouched, right there in the open yard. She bent her knees, opened her arms wide, her face breaking into a grin so bright it looked almost insane given the circumstances. And she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Come here, baby." The cub hesitated. That alone should have been impossible. A Korthal cub in a charged state did not stop. Its instincts were hardwired: aggression, aggressionate, overwhelm, dominate. Entire xenobiology texts were built around that fact. Yet the cub faltered mid-stride, claws gouging furrows in the dirt as it skidded closer. It made a confused sound, not a roar, not a hiss, a chirring trill. The cadets stared. The human stayed crouched, arms still open, voice softer now, but no less certain. "That's it. I see you. I've got you." The cub took one tentative step, then another, and then, with a sound that would later be described in incident reports as a high-energy emotional release, and in private conversations as a sob, the cub launched itself forward, straight into her arms. The impact knocked the human backward onto the dirt. Cadets shouted. Instructors surged forward, then froze, because the cub didn't attack. It curled. 600 kilograms of apex predator folded in on itself like a frightened child, claws retracting, tail wrapping around both of them as the cub buried its horned head against the human's chest. The human laughed. A breathless, startled laugh as she wrapped her arms around the cub's neck plates and held on. "There you go," she murmured. "I knew you'd come." The cub shuddered. Then it made the sound soft, broken. Repeated, "Mama." The word carried through the yard like a shockwave. Every species present recognized it. A designation for primary caregiver, source of safety. Anchor being, the human froze. Slowly, her expression changed. The smile trembled. Her eyes went wide, then wet. She swallowed hard and pressed her forehead gently against the cub's armored brow. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, sweetheart." The cadets didn't know what to do. No one did. The human's name was Mara Ellison. She was not a soldier. She was not a scientist. She was a logistics specialist, temporarily reassigned to K-17 after the cub had been recovered from a shattered transport wreck drifting near the Moon's orbit. The cub had been alone, injured, starving. Every containment protocol had failed. Sedation triggered panic. Isolation caused violent episodes. Artificial caretakers had been shredded. The Korthal cub had refused food from anyone, except Mara. At first, it had been incidental. She'd sat outside the enclosure during her breaks, eating ration bars, talking to herself about inventory manifests and broken cargo lifts. The cub had watched her through the reinforced field, head tilted. Then it had started mimicking her sounds. Then it had pressed its head against the barrier where she sat. The xenobiologists had been baffled. The military had been alarmed. Mara had just kept showing up. "He's scared," she'd said when questioned. "It's a predator," they'd replied. "So are we," she'd shrugged. The charge had been a test. They wanted to see if the cub still viewed her as safe when the barriers were removed. What they hadn't expected was this. The instructors finally lowered their weapons. The cadets slowly relaxed, though many remained transfixed. Watching the impossible sight of a human gently rocking a Korthal apex cub, humming softly under her breath. One cadetta Virexian, with eyes adapted for micro-expressions, spoke first. "She's regulating its stress responses," he whispered. "With physical contact." Another shook their head. "No, it's regulating her too. Look at her breathing." They were both right. Mara sat there in the dirt, arms aching, heart pounding, tears streaking her face as the cub clung to her like the universe might take her away if it loosened its grip. "I've got you," she kept saying. "I'm right here." The cub's tail slowly unwound, its breathing steadied, its massive weight settled, trusting, against her. From that day on, the reports changed. Not subject K-alpha juvenile, but the cub. Not handler, but Mara. Weeks later, the cadets would talk about it in hushed tones. How fear had met open arms. How an apex predator had chosen comfort over dominance. How a human, unarmored and unafraid, had rewritten every assumption they held about strength. And when the cub grew, when it eventually stood taller than any of them, when its roar could shake hangars and its presence silenced rooms, it still followed Mara, still lowered its massive head so she could rest her forehead against its brow. Still made that soft sound when it was tired or frightened. Ma. The galaxy would record the incident as a breakthrough in cross-species bonding. The cadets would remember it differently. They would remember the moment the cub charged, and the human didn't flee. She opened her arms, and the universe learned, once again, why humans were dangerous in ways no one ever expected.